Thank you for having me today. Well, 3D printing has found its way to a variety of sectors, as we have seen today. And I'm going to talk about its application in medical device industry, which is very peculiar industry, as I will explain soon. It's part of a project, a multidisciplinary project that we have people from all over ranges, material scientists and mechanical engineers and business/economic people, including myself. Okay, so today I'm gonna talk about some preliminary finding of this project that has started about less than a year ago, and I will go through a process mapping of the 3D printed medical devices, stakeholder mapping, just to see how the industry look like, how complex it is, and identifying opportunity areas in this industry to expand the application of this particular technology, which eventually can expand the industry itself, and identifying some barriers that stop those opportunity areas to be realized. So this is going to be my talk today. A little bit of introduction on the industry itself. There are about 500 companies in Australia employing about 20,000 and the market value of 12 billion. And the recent report by CSIRO showed that there is a huge potential still for this industry to come and grow in the coming 8 years. And that is particularly through development of technologies that has been identified as opportunities for growth. There's a list of those technologies, and one of them is actually the application of 3D printing in orthopedic implants. It's very niche, but it has been identified has a lot of potential because it can create jobs, and it can improve the export for Australian companies and so on and so forth. It also has clear, well, not necessarily, I can't say clear, but at least some inconclusive evidence is out there that it has benefit for patients, because it can reduce surgical complication rate, pre-operation time, hospital lengths of stay, and total cost, which eventually benefit the healthcare system, because at the end of the day, a big part of it's a healthcare system that pays for this kind of surgical operations. Two examples, when I say 3D printed medical device, it's wide range, but I want to give you just two examples of what they are, what I mean. In the left, in the left, we see a titanium 3D printed spine that is patient specific. Why it's beneficial for patients? Because traditionally, if you have issues with your spine, or there's a missing point, or there's damaged part, what you would have done was you would get the off-the-shelf implants. And the problem is that they are in a predefined sizes: medium, large, small, and then usually it doesn't fit perfectly. Then there is revisions and so on and so forth. Very lengthy process for the patient. But now what you can do is you just get a CT scan or MRI of the patient, and then you print a patient specific that matches exactly the missing point or the damaged point for the patient. So there is no need for revision. That's one example. The other example is about the bone cancer. So if this is the infected part of a bone, traditionally what you would have done is you'd replace the entire bone. Think of a leg. You would have replaced the entire bone. But now you can just remove the infected part, and then printed the exact missing point, 3D print the exact missing point, once again through the MRI imaging and all things. These are the example of project that has been done at RMIT together with Anatomics and Stryker and a couple of industry partners. So this is what I'm talking about when I say 3D printed implants. However, in Australia, there are only very few firms that they are active in the implant sector, and even fewer that they use or utilize 3D printing. So that was the starting things, and we started to say, okay, what's going on? Why, if it's so beneficial for patients, and it has huge potential for the economy, why so many few frames? The first things that struck us was this industry is particularly complex, and it has a really wide range of stakeholders that in often cases they don't really communicate with each other and coordinate with each other. And there is sometimes a problem of catch-22 issues. An example is when you talk with health insurers, let's say Bupa, they are very reluctant currently to cover the 3D printed implants. Why? Well, they might have a legitimate reason. They say, well, we don't have enough evidence. We don't know how long it takes. It's too risky for us. It will fail. We don't know. It's costly. How to create more evidence to make them confident? Well, manufacturers should produce more. But if nobody is covering it, then the patient doesn't want it because it's costly for patients. So you see the issue. And that's one example of this issue that stop, even the knowledge is there, even the benefit is out there, we know it has stopped the expansion. So that's just a background that we start to tackle, and then we define this project. So the aim is to understand how to adopt and expand this particular application in this industry. The expected outcome is to have comprehensive framework or guideline that hopefully benefit the range of stakeholders, but particularly the manufacturers and the industry players. And the impact is, as I said, to unlock the potential of this technology in the medical device industry that benefits the new entrants to the industry, but also large firms that are already in the industry, patients, and healthcare system. It's financed by RMIT. We have Lund University in Sweden as academic partner, and a couple of industry partners, both large and small ones. The scope is mostly 3D printed metal devices, but we also touch upon other material as well. So the first major round of data collection happened about 4 months ago, that we had a full-day workshop at RMIT. Prior to the workshop, we identified about 112 stakeholders in different categories in this industry. We managed to have 50 of them attended to the workshop, and majority of the things that I'm presenting is based on the data that we collected that day. And this is just a distribution of the participant of the workshop. So the first thing is just to see how the process of the industry look like. It's a little bit complicated process, and there is a fairly long journey that the titanium ore, as a very raw material, goes all the way down to be an implanted patient inside the body of the patient. It goes through, powder development, through even the 3D printed machine development and software development, and then goes down to here, either goes to large manufacturers or small ones. And large manufacturers usually do everything from the design to manufacturing to sterilization and post-processing. But small firms, usually they do the design and outsource the rest. And this happens in either case in collaboration with hospitals, because you get the CT scan image from the patient and then give them back the implant for surgery. And of course, there is a fairly unsmooth process of regulatory issues involved here and reimbursement as well, that I will touch upon a little bit. But one could talk a lot about this process that we try to map, but one thing that is clear is you see a different stakeholders in this process map, in this journey. And when it comes to stakeholders, then the second things we did was try to map who they are and how they interact. First of all, in the middle, we have the goal. We want to have a wider adoption and diffusion of 3D printed in medical device industry, because we believe that there are certain benefits. And then we have a wide category of stakeholders, from industry associations to research centers, to regulators, insurers, surgeons, patients, hospitals, and then of course the manufacturers of the device. And each of them, they interact in one way or another. They influence. They have certain rules on the ultimate goal. For instance, industry association, we call it, they enhance. They usually, either they do nothing or they enhance, because through certain targeted financing for material development or some startup funding and those things. SMEs, they also enhance this, because usually they go and target certain niche application which large firm doesn't want to touch those because of the economy of scale, and so on and so forth. The blue ones are beneficiaries, and it's fairly clear who benefit, and I touched upon that already. A range of stakeholders benefit from this. The tricky one is the red ones. Well, we call it influencers. But the meaning of influencer is that they can either positively or negatively affect the adoption, depending on what they do and how they, on their actions. For instance, large companies, they can positively affect this by investing on R&D and pushing the knowledge in this industry, inventing new things. But at the same time, they can do lobbying with regulators to stop competitions and create monopoly for them, so they eventually, on their own benefit, but it slowed down the expansion of the industry, because it boycott the SMEs. So that's why we call it. Or surgeons. Surgeons could be very open-minded and then use 3D printed medical devices, implants, or they could have rigid mentality and say, no, this is, we don't know, it's just dangerous, and even if it has theoretical benefit for the patient, but yeah. So, and then one could talk about this. So this is the second things we did, just to try to map how they interact. And then we went to kind of a core part of the project to identify the opportunity areas for the expansion of the industry, how we can do that. And there are different ways. And we identify 4 categories. It could be technology side, material science, from regulatory perspective, and from the business model. In this presentation, I will only touch upon these 2. And the rest is in our report on the other 2 categories. But these opportunities are, in principle, they can, if we really realize those and remove the barriers, they can, in principle, lead to the wider spread of this technology in this industry. Okay, so the business model, it's changing. And the 2 major players are small firms or large firms in the industry, and the rule of the business model is changing depending on another 2 players in this particular industry, which are service bureaus and hospitals. And I will talk very quickly on that. We found that decentralized or distributed manufacturing is getting the dominant business model in this industry. This is not very new business model in other industries, but this is getting much more, and by decentralized manufacturing, Marcus was talking about this earlier today. It's basically a 2-step process. You design a CAD file yourself, and then you send the CAD file to some service bureaus to print it close to your customer. In a simpler form, and then you can send it nationally within Australia, or you can send it globally. But if you do it globally, there is a complication of juridical regulatory compliances. That those manufacturers that they are going to print for you, they might, that doesn't necessarily match with the Australian regulatory framework of medical devices. And this decentralized model that seems to be becoming more common among the companies is beneficial, because it lowered the price of the finished devices, because it lowered the logistics. There is no basically logistic. You just design a CAD, you press a button, the file is there, and then you print, lower the labor and energy in principle. And then it also has a faster lead time, which is particularly important for the patient to receive the implants. our investigation shows that the smaller ones, the small companies are more prone to that, while the large ones are less because of the liability issues and they want to do everything themselves. And then you could, when you send the file somewhere else, you can send it in 2 different places, either service bureaus close to hospital or directly to the hospital. Directly to the hospital is a little bit appealing from the first side because you just send it to hospital and then next to the surgeon theater, you print it there. But then there are issues of economy of scale that is not economically feasible usually for hospitals, and skills and other issues that is not really available in the hospitals yet. However, it can be remedied by cluster of hospital idea that I can talk about it later if you're interested what it is. The second part is regulatory aspects. TGA regulates the medical device in Australia. And innovation, we talked about this earlier, innovation usually happens first and then the regulations comes later, and we have these outdated issues here. In our case, one example is actually the high-risk devices like patient-specific implant, the photos that I showed you, they are currently exempt from pre-market approval and QMS certification. Because the argument is just one-off, but this could be also dangerous because only one or two scandal is enough for the entire industry to be wiped out. But TJ is currently working on revising that, but it's not a regulation yet. This I can skip due to the time things, and finally we identify some barriers that stop these 2 opportunity areas to be realized. We did a survey and we asked a range of barriers, but in terms of the business model, we have seen that the respondent, they think that the staff training, especially in hospitals, more than 70% of the respondents, they think that this is the barrier because there is no staff training, so that stops the decentralized model based manufacture based in hospital. Also, the lack of endorsement of surgeons. This is also another issue that has been raised. They are not technical issues. They are non-technical / business model issues. And that's what I just said. Concerning the regulatory issues, companies are complaining that the approval process is very lengthy, and especially SMEs, they complain that this is sometimes very vague. But also the reimbursement process by healthcare insurers, as I said, because the health insurers, they reimburse both patient but also manufacturers. But it is again a very complicated and unclear process, especially for smaller manufacturers. So these has been raised as issues. To conclude, this is a project that will run for another 2 years. We are fairly in the beginning just to map out what is happening in the industry, some preliminary finding on barriers and opportunity areas. But one of the things that we are currently starting to do is try to have this root cause analysis to identify what is really the root of these barriers and how, if possible, to remedy. For instance, think of the surgeons that doesn't want to adopt this 3D printing. Why is that? Is it because they have fundamental issues with this, because they are trained 30 years ago with off-the-shelf and they are not going to accept, or they are happy to do it, they just need a little bit more evidence, like the health insurers. And depending on which one is the root of a cause, one could go further and try to recommend or try to provide certain guidelines to. But that is basically what I wanted to share with you, and happy to have further chat. Thank you very much.